That orange box down right now before you ruin everything we have left in this house. My name is Melody, a 28-year-old woman returning to our sprawling family ranch on the outskirts of Austin shortly after my parents passed away. The suffocating emptiness of the property hit me the moment I walked through the rusted iron gates. I truly thought coming back to my childhood home would bring me some peace, but I was completely wrong. To cope with the immense pain of losing the two people I loved most, I decided to personally renovate their dusty old bedroom to preserve their final memories. I spent hours clearing out decades of accumulated belongings until my foot struck a loose wooden floorboard in the darkest corner of the room. Curiosity overpowered my grief as I pried the creaky wood open with my bare hands, revealing a completely hidden compartment. Resting perfectly inside the dark cavity was a mysterious orange box covered in thick layers of cobwebs. A sudden chill ran down my spine as an overwhelming sense of dread mixed with intense curiosity urged me to reach inside. I carefully brushed away the dust, taking a deep breath, before preparing to lift the lid and uncover whatever shocking secret my parents had buried out of sight for all these years. Before the story continues, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for choosing to watch and for being part of this journey. The rapid clicking of heels echoing across the living room hardwood floor abruptly interrupted my thoughts. Before I could even fully process what was happening inside that dusty space, my sister Cynthia stormed into the doorway with an expression of pure fury contorting her pale face. She glared at me as if I had just committed an unforgivable crime simply by standing inside the private sanctuary that used to belong to our beloved parents. Her chest heaved heavily while her eyes darted frantically around the cleaned sections of the room before locking back onto my completely bewildered face with an intensity that genuinely startled me. It was almost as if she was desperately scanning the area to see if I had uncovered a specific hidden item before she managed to physically intervene. What exactly do you think you are doing digging through their personal belongings without asking for my permission first? She screamed at the top of her lungs while marching aggressively toward the center of the bedroom to block my path. Cynthia immediately began dictating a series of incredibly harsh and entirely unreasonable rules regarding my presence on the property. She explicitly ordered me to stay completely away from this specific area and absolutely forbade me from touching any keepsakes or documents left behind by the people who raised us. According to her strict mandates, the entire house was now under her sole jurisdiction, meaning any attempt to reorganize their belongings would be treated as a direct violation of her authority. She insisted that everything needed to remain exactly as it was for complicated legal purposes, refusing to offer any logical explanation for why my simple act of cleaning was considered such a massive threat to her control. You have absolutely no right to be snooping around in here because everything they left behind is extremely fragile and needs to be handled exclusively by me, she declared with a cold and condescending tone while physically positioning herself between me and the old wooden desk. Without giving me a single second to defend my innocent intentions, she launched into a bitter tirade about the overwhelming financial burden she was supposedly carrying all by herself. Cynthia complained endlessly about massive hidden debts our parents had allegedly accumulated over the years, while claiming she was the only one sacrificing her own livelihood to keep the ranch from going into foreclosure. She painted a highly exaggerated, tragic picture of herself drowning in unpaid medical bills alongside outrageous funeral expenses, while practically accusing me of abandoning the family during their hardest times. According to her dramatic narrative, the estate was completely bankrupt, forcing her to graciously shield me from the terrifying reality of our family financial collapse. You have absolutely no idea how much money it costs to keep this massive place running while constantly paying off the disastrous loans Mom and Dad secretly took out before they died. She sneered while crossing her arms defensively across her chest. Despite her dramatic sob story about impending financial ruin and unbearable sacrifices, I instantly noticed a glaring contradiction that made my blood boil with intense suspicion. While she practically begged for sympathy over her supposed poverty, a ridiculously expensive designer leather handbag featuring shiny gold hardware was slung casually over her shoulder. Furthermore, through the open hallway window, I could clearly see a brand new luxury sports car gleaming brightly in the afternoon sun right next to the front porch, where she had just parked it. It made absolutely no logical sense for someone supposedly drowning in severe family debt to flaunt such extravagant new purchases within mere weeks of a devastating loss. Before I could formulate a proper sentence to point out her glaring hypocrisy, Cynthia forcefully snatched the heavy brass keyring resting on the wooden nightstand. She aggressively grabbed my arm to shove me out into the hallway before slamming the heavy oak door shut with a deafening thud that echoed throughout the empty house. I stood there in absolute shock as she aggressively turned the key in the lock, twice, shoving the entire keychain deep into her designer pocket to ensure I could never enter again. This room stays permanently locked from now on, and if I ever catch you trying to break in here again, I will personally call the sheriff to remove you from this property. She threatened coldly before turning on her expensive heels to walk away. 2 days later, a heavy and suffocating silence enveloped the entire sprawling ranch as the tension between us reached a breaking point. I waited patiently behind the thick curtains of the upstairs hallway until I finally saw Cynthia driving her luxury car down the long gravel driveway toward the main road for her afternoon shopping trip. Knowing I only had a limited window of time before she returned, I quickly hurried out to the backyard and used a sturdy wooden ladder to reach the small window located behind the overgrown rose bushes. My heart pounded against my ribs while I carefully pried the old latch open to crawl back into the forbidden sanctuary that had been locked away from me. The air inside the room felt stale and cold, yet I moved with desperate urgency toward my father's heavy oak desk to find the truth she was so terrified of me discovering. I spent the next hour meticulously searching through the deep bottom drawers until I stumbled upon a thick pile of shredded paper hidden inside a nondescript manila folder. My hands trembled as I realized these were dozens of bank transaction receipts that had been intentionally destroyed to hide something incredibly significant from my view. With agonizing patience, I sat on the floor and began piecing the tiny fragments of paper back together like a complex and haunting puzzle that revealed a devastating financial betrayal. The restored documents clearly showed that hundreds of thousands of dollars had been systematically drained from my parents' primary accounts during the final weeks of their lives. I stood there in absolute shock while staring at the undeniable evidence of theft before whispering to myself in a voice filled with cold fury, "What exactly did you do with their life savings, Cynthia?" The more I searched the cluttered shelves, the more I realized that the financial theft was only the beginning of her elaborate and heartless scheme to dismantle our family history. While reaching for an old photography book, I accidentally knocked over a stack of loose papers and discovered a half-printed draft of a formal sales agreement. My blood ran cold as I scanned the legal jargon which revealed Cynthia was secretly negotiating to sell our entire ancestral ranch to a massive commercial real estate development corporation. The document even detailed plans to demolish the house and flatten the land to make room for a luxury housing complex, proving she had absolutely no intention of honoring our parents' final wishes. I gripped the edges of the contract so tightly that the paper began to crinkle under my fingers while I gritted my teeth and firmly declared, "I will never let you sell Mom and Dad's legacy to strangers just to line your own pockets." Every single memory of my father's meticulous record-keeping and my mother's transparent nature came rushing back to me, confirming that their alleged debts were nothing but a cruel fabrication designed to keep me compliant. It was now painfully obvious that Cynthia had spent months weaving a web of lies to justify her greed, while she prepared to betray the very people who had provided her with everything. I knew I couldn't stay in that room much longer, so I focused my energy on locating the mysterious orange box I had previously hidden under the heavy bed frame during my first day back. I needed that box more than ever because I was certain it contained the ultimate proof required to stop her destructive plans and finally hold her accountable for her crimes. After successfully retrieving the hidden container, I carefully retreated back through the window and felt a newfound sense of determination burning within my soul to expose the monster my sister had truly become. Late that evening, the atmosphere became as suffocating as if a massive storm was about to break over the entire ranch. The heavy silence of the house was shattered the very moment Cynthia stepped through the front door and dropped her expensive shopping bags onto the floor. She immediately noticed the fresh, muddy footprints near the hallway and the telltale smudges of dirt left on the white windowsill of the forbidden room. Her eyes widened with a mixture of shock and sheer territorial rage as she realized I had completely ignored her strict warnings to stay away from our parents' private sanctuary. I could see the veins pulsing in her neck while she marched toward me with her fists clenched tightly at her sides, looking like she wanted to physically erase my presence from the building. A fierce and explosive confrontation erupted right in the middle of the kitchen as Cynthia began frantically throwing kitchenware onto the counters to vent her uncontrollable anger. She unleashed a torrent of vile and insulting language, accusing me of being an ungrateful leech who had no respect for the privacy of the dead or the authority of the living. Her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred while she repeatedly threatened to call the local sheriff to have me forcibly removed from the property as a common trespasser. The air in the room felt thick with her hostility as she paced back and forth like a caged animal refusing to let me even attempt to explain my discovery of her financial secrets. Cynthia pointed her finger directly at my face and screamed in a piercing voice that echoed through the hallways. "You have no right to be snooping around my house, so pack your bags and get out before I call the cops." I felt a cold wave of calm wash over me despite her terrifying outburst, because I knew the truth was far more powerful than her desperate theatrical performance. Instead of flinching or retreating as I usually did, I stepped forward and looked her directly in those cold and calculating eyes to deliver a firm counterattack. I was no longer interested in playing the role of the submissive younger sister while she systematically dismantled everything our family had worked decades to build. Without hesitating for a single second, I firmly countered her threats by demanding the truth she was trying so hard to hide. "Where did all the money go, Cynthia? And why are you secretly trying to sell the ranch behind my back?" The moment those specific words left my mouth, Cynthia's entire demeanor shifted from aggressive arrogance to a state of absolute visible panic. Her face flushed a deep and unnatural shade of crimson as she struggled to find a logical lie to cover the evidence I had discovered among the shredded papers. Rather than answering my direct question about the missing millions or the secret development contract, she lashed out with another violent display of power. She suddenly grabbed an antique ceramic vase from the kitchen island and hurled it onto the hardwood floor with all her strength, watching it shatter into 1,000 useless pieces just to intimidate me into silence. After finishing her explosive tantrum, Cynthia stormed up the stairs without another word and slammed her bedroom door shut with a force that made the framed family photos on the walls rattle. She left me standing completely alone in the middle of the silent house, surrounded by the sharp shards of broken pottery and the undeniable evidence of her absolute betrayal. I stood there staring at the mess, realizing that the sister I once knew had been entirely replaced by a greedy stranger who was willing to destroy our family legacy for her own selfish gain. The next morning brought with it a haunting and eerie stillness that seemed to permeate every single corner of the sprawling Texas ranch. I waited until I was absolutely certain that Cynthia was still deep in her slumber before I carefully retrieved the mysterious orange box from its temporary hiding place. Moving as silently as a shadow, I carried the heavy container up to the cramped and dusty attic, where the sunlight barely managed to filter through the small, grimy window. I used a pair of heavy metal pliers to forcefully break the rusted lock that had protected these secrets for far too long, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and grim determination. As the metal finally snapped open, I felt a heavy weight of anticipation settle in my stomach because I knew the contents of this box would change my life forever. Resting neatly inside the secret compartment was a yellowed handwritten diary belonging to Mom, alongside a thick stack of legal documents that had been meticulously sealed with dark red wax. I carefully opened the fragile pages of the journal, recognizing her elegant cursive handwriting, which now appeared shaky and uncertain, as if she had been writing under extreme duress. The more I read, the more my vision became blurred by a thick veil of tears as the horrific reality of our parents' final months began to reveal itself in heartbreaking detail. It became painfully clear through her words that they were not suffering from natural decline, but were actually victims of a calculated and cruel psychological imprisonment orchestrated by their own daughter. My tears flowed uncontrollably as I read those trembling lines written by my mother's hand. Cynthia has locked us in our room and refuses to let us call anyone until we sign over the property. I sat on the cold attic floor in absolute agony as I realized Cynthia had ruthlessly isolated our elderly parents from the outside world during their most vulnerable moments. She had deliberately exploited their fading physical health to coerce them into signing a series of illegal property transfer documents that gave her total control over the ranch and their remaining bank accounts. The legal files inside the box contained the original versions of their estate plan, which proved that the documents Cynthia was currently using were nothing but fraudulent forgeries, created through intimidation and deceit. It was a level of cold-blooded betrayal that I could hardly comprehend, especially coming from a sister who had always claimed to be the one making the most sacrifices for the family. Gripping the fragile diary tightly in my trembling hands, I made a solemn and unwavering vow to myself. I promise you, Mom and Dad, I will make her pay for every single tear she caused you in your final days. A wave of uncontrollable and intense fury surged through my chest as I finally accepted that the person sharing my own blood was actually a heartless criminal who had systematically destroyed our family from within. The realization that she had stood by their bedsides with a fake smile while secretly planning to rob them of their dignity and legacy made me feel a profound sense of disgust. I carefully packed the original documents back into the orange box, knowing that I now possessed the lethal evidence required to dismantle her web of lies and reclaim what was rightfully ours. I was no longer just a grieving daughter or a submissive younger sister, but a woman possessed by a singular mission to seek justice for the two people who could no longer speak for themselves. 3 days later, the time had finally come for everything to be settled once and for all in this exhausting family war. I decided to secretly take the entire folder of documents to the downtown office of my lawyer, Mr. Davis, to request that he verify the absolute legal validity of the original will hidden inside the orange box. I walked through the quiet hallways of the law firm with a sense of grim purpose, knowing that the contents of that faded folder held the power to destroy the elaborate web of lies Cynthia had so carefully woven. My heart raced as I handed the papers over to the seasoned professional, hoping that my parents' true intentions were legally protected despite the betrayal they suffered in their final days. Mr. Davis spent the next hour meticulously examining every single signature and notary seal under a powerful magnifying glass to ensure there were no discrepancies in the paperwork. He finally leaned back in his leather chair and confirmed that this original will was the only legitimate document officially granting ownership of the ranch and assets worth $2,500,000 to both sisters in an equal split. The sheer scale of the inheritance was staggering, making it even more sickening to realize that Cynthia had been trying to steal over $1 million that rightfully belonged to me. The lawyer explained that the evidence of forgery and elder abuse documented in the diary would provide us with an incredibly strong advantage in the upcoming legal proceedings. He pushed his glasses up his nose and looked at me with an extremely serious expression before stating firmly, "This original will completely invalidate whatever forged document Cynthia is holding, and we have solid grounds to file a major lawsuit." Immediately after leaving the law office, my best friend Brenda arrived in her SUV to pick me up and assist me in transporting all the original documents to a secure location for safekeeping. We drove directly to the local bank, where Brenda helped me organize the files into a private safety deposit box to prevent Cynthia from ever having the chance to locate or destroy the evidence. Having her by my side during this crucial moment provided me with the practical support I needed to ensure that no part of my plan could be compromised by Cynthia's unpredictable temper. We made sure the bank manager verified our entry, creating a permanent record that these life-altering documents were now safely under my exclusive control. While carefully stacking the important folders into the narrow metal safety box, I turned to Brenda and spoke in a low but determined voice. "She thinks she has won, but I am going to let her dig her own grave before I drop the truth on her." To set a perfect trap for my greedy sister, I returned to the ranch and began acting as if I had completely accepted my defeat and was preparing to move out for good. I intentionally left half-filled suitcases scattered around my room and spent the afternoon packing away minor personal belongings to convince Cynthia that she had successfully intimidated me into submission. I even made a point of avoiding eye contact with her during dinner, allowing her to bask in her own arrogance as she clearly started to lower her defenses. By playing the role of the broken and submissive younger sister, I was ensuring that she would feel comfortable enough to proceed with her illegal land sale right in front of me. I could see the smug satisfaction radiating from her as she watched me pack, unaware that she was actually walking directly into the legal ambush I had so meticulously prepared for her. On Friday afternoon, the greedy finally walked straight into the trap they had so arrogantly set for themselves. The living room of our family ranch was filled with a thick air of smug satisfaction as Cynthia sat confidently at the large mahogany table while hosting a representative from the Commercial Real Estate Development Corporation. She displayed an incredibly condescending and arrogant attitude, laughing and chatting with the businessman as if she already possessed the millions of dollars from the sale of our ancestral land. I watched from the shadows of the hallway as she reached for an expensive gold fountain pen, her hand steady, and her face glowing with the twisted joy of someone who believed they had successfully stolen an entire family legacy without facing any consequences. It was sickening to witness how easily she could smile and make small talk while preparing to sign away the very ground where our parents had spent their entire lives building a future for us. Just as she was about to press the pen to the signature line of the predatory contract, I abruptly pushed the heavy oak doors open alongside Mr. Davis and marched into the center of the room. The sudden entrance completely extinguished the obnoxious and triumphant smile on Cynthia's face as she stared at my lawyer in absolute bewilderment and growing fear. The real estate representative looked up from his briefcase in total confusion, clearly not expecting a legal intervention to interrupt what he had been told was a simple and undisputed private transaction. Cynthia tried to stand up to regain her composure, but her knees seemed to tremble slightly as she realized her carefully constructed wall of lies was beginning to crumble under the weight of our unexpected presence. I walked directly to the table and forcefully tossed the mysterious orange box along with a certified copy of the original will onto the polished wood surface for everyone to see. I looked the stunned real estate representative directly in the eye and demanded that he immediately stop all illegal transactions because Cynthia possessed absolutely no legal authority to sell even a single acre of this ranch. The heavy thud of the box hitting the table echoed through the silent room like a gavel signaling the beginning of the end for the elaborate fraud my sister had been perpetrating for months. Mr. Davis stood firmly by my side, with his arms crossed, his professional presence lending an undeniable air of legal authority to the shocking documents I was now presenting as evidence. Cynthia's face turned a ghostly shade of pale as she stood up abruptly and began to stammer in a state of absolute, visible panic. "Where did you get that box? You have absolutely no right to be showing these fake documents to anyone." I ignored her desperate shriek and maintained a steady, piercing gaze into her trembling eyes while I made my final resounding declaration to everyone in the room. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal and to understand that her reign of terror over our family's history had officially reached its bitter conclusion. With a voice that remained calm yet vibrated with an intense sense of justice, I looked her in the eye and stated, "The charade is over, Cynthia, because this original will prove you are nothing but a desperate fraud who stole from our dying parents." The real estate representative did not wait for an explanation as he began frantically gathering his folders and slamming his briefcase shut, clearly wanting to distance his company from a potential criminal investigation. He shot Cynthia a look of pure disgust for wasting his time with a fraudulent deal before turning on his heels and marching out of the front door without saying another word of farewell. Left alone in the wreckage of her failed scheme, Cynthia collapsed back into her chair with her head in her hands, looking completely defeated and broken for the first time in her life. She tried to offer a few more weak and pathetic excuses about how she was only trying to protect us, but her desperate justifications were now entirely hollow and meaningless in the face of the overwhelming evidence sitting on the table. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of her crimes, proving that no amount of designer clothes or luxury cars could ever hide the rot of a soul that had betrayed its own flesh and blood. 2 months later, my life had officially turned a completely new page as the dust finally began to settle on the wreckage of my family's past. A fierce and grueling legal battle took place within the hallowed halls of the county courthouse, where Mr. Davis represented me with unwavering precision against Cynthia. We presented a mountain of evidence involving serious allegations of massive financial fraud and the heartless exploitation of our vulnerable elderly parents. The courtroom remained deathly silent as the judge reviewed the harrowing entries in Mom's diary and the forensic evidence of forged signatures that proved Cynthia had systematically dismantled our family estate. It was a long and emotionally draining process to witness the full extent of her crimes being laid bare before a jury of our peers, but I knew that silence was no longer an option if I wanted to honor the memory of those who raised us. The court meticulously examined every piece of evidence found within the orange box and ultimately delivered a decisive verdict that stripped Cynthia of all her ill-gotten gains. She was found liable for the total amount of her theft, and the judge ordered an immediate seizure of her luxury assets and bank accounts to repay the $2,500,000 she had secretly embezzled. Seeing her brand-new sports car and designer wardrobe being liquidated to satisfy the judgment provided a sense of grim justice that no amount of hollow apologies could ever replicate. She had built her entire lifestyle on a foundation of lies and betrayal, and watching that foundation crumble under the weight of the law was the only way to truly close this dark chapter. I made the cold and necessary decision to completely sever all blood ties with Cynthia as I prepared to move forward with my life without her toxic presence. As I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high, I refused to acknowledge her desperate sobbing or her pathetic pleas for a late and insincere forgiveness. I understood then that some betrayals are so profound that they permanently shatter the possibility of reconciliation, regardless of how much history two people might share. I chose to prioritize my own mental peace and the integrity of our family legacy over the misplaced sense of obligation toward a sister who had treated our parents like financial targets rather than human beings. The entire sprawling Texas ranch was legally returned to my sole care, allowing me to begin an extensive renovation project to restore the property to its former glory. I have successfully transformed the house and the surrounding lands into a peaceful sanctuary dedicated to permanently preserving the beautiful legacy that Mom and Dad spent their entire lives building. The once suffocating atmosphere of the house has been replaced by a sense of warmth and light as I fill the rooms with laughter and honest memories once again. Every corner of the ranch now stands as a testament to the fact that truth and love are far more enduring than the fleeting rewards of greed and deception. Before we conclude today's story, it is important for us to take a moment to reflect on the deeper meanings behind this intense family struggle. This story is not just about a missing inheritance or a secret box, but it serves as a powerful reminder that the people we trust most can sometimes be the ones capable of the greatest harm. We believe that a family should be a fortress of protection, yet we often see how easily greed can rot that fortress from the inside out until there is nothing left but shadows. Please do not overlook the valuable lessons that Melody's journey has provided for all of us who value integrity and justice in our own lives. First, it is clear that no amount of wealth is worth the loss of one's soul or the betrayal of those who gave us life and unconditional love. Second, we must always remain vigilant and brave enough to question anomalies in our surroundings, even when the truth is painful to confront. We want to ask you directly, if you were in Melody's position, would you have the courage to cut ties completely with your only sibling to uphold the truth? Or perhaps you believe there is always a path toward forgiveness, even in the face of such calculated and heartless deception. We would like to express our deepest and most sincere gratitude to all of our incredible viewers who have stayed with us until the very end of this emotional journey. Your continued support and engagement allow us to bring these meaningful stories to light and explore the complexities of human nature together as a community. Please leave a comment below to share your honest thoughts on how Melody handled this situation and let us know your own perspective on family loyalty. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button to support the channel so that we can continue to grow and bring you more impactful stories in the future.